I had this a bit of an existential crisis in the grocery store the other day.
Oh, no, in the grocery store of all places.
Yeah, I was just standing in the cereal aisle, just staring at this massive wall of options. You got the sugary stuff, the keto stuff, the ancient grains, the ones that claim to boost your brain power. Literally 50 different choices.
The paradox of choice right there.
Exactly. And I'm standing there holding my smartphone, which is essentially a supercomputer connecting me to the sum of all human knowledge. And I had this really weird realization.
Let me guess you realize we live in a sci-fi novel.
Basically, yes. We live in this era of just absolutely mind-bending capacity. I mean, we can splice genes in a garage lab. We land rockets backwards on barges in the ocean. We have AI writing poetry. We've mastered the physical world in ways that our ancestors couldn't even fathom.
Technically, yes, we have incredible capacity.
But, and here's the massive contradiction that got me thinking. If you turn on the news or listen to a central banker or honestly just look at your own bank account, the narrative is completely different. The headline is always about scarcity.
Always.
We're told we are running out of things, that limits are just everywhere. We have to tighten our belts. It feels a little like gaslighting. We have this clear capacity for abundance, but the daily reality is scarcity. And I just keep asking why.
That contradiction, that friction right there is the absolute heartbeat of what we are covering today. Because usually when people ask why things are scarce, it gets framed as a simple resource problem, like we just don't have enough stuff.
Right. Not enough oil, not enough wheat, not enough land to go around.
Exactly. But the material we are diving into today, it's a piece called Scarcity, is manufactured, and it basically takes a sledgehammer to that entire idea.
It's a pretty aggressive title, I have to say. It definitely implies intent.
It does, and that is entirely the point. The central argument here is that scarcity isn't some bug in our economic system. It's a feature. It's a very deliberate design choice.
And we should probably clarify for everyone listening right away, this is not some tinfoil hat conspiracy theory.
No, not at all.
We're not talking about a cabal of people in a dark, smoky room stealing your pie. The source actually treats this as a systems engineering analysis. It looks at the global economy as a machine and simply asks, what is this machine actually optimized to do?
Precisely. And the shocking answer is that the machine is optimized to create limits, not to remove them. So our primary mission for this deep dive is to parse out the difference between a technological threshold, meaning what we literally can do, and a political threshold, which is what we are allowed to do.
We're going to explore the idea that post-scarcity, that Star Trek utopia where everyone just has what they need, isn't actually science fiction anymore. Technologically, the source claims we are already there.
We are there, but the abundance is unevenly distributed by design. We need to unpack why our current economic architecture actually treats abundance as a threat rather than the ultimate goal.
Okay, that is a massive claim to make. Because if I walk up to someone who is struggling to pay rent or struggling to buy groceries and I say, hey, great news, post-scarcity is here, they're going to laugh in my face.
Or probably yell at you.
Fair point. So we need to bring the receipts. Let's start with the physical reality, the actual nuts and bolts. The source material hits us right out of the gate with agricultural data. And honestly, the numbers kind of blew my mind.
The agricultural data is probably the starkest example of the gap between the physical reality and the narrative we are constantly sold. If you look at the FAO data, that's the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, the world currently produces enough edible calories to feed over 10 billion people.
10 billion, and we only have, what, a little over 8 billion people on the planet right now?
Correct. So if you just do the back of the napkin math, we have a surplus, a highly significant surplus. Logically speaking, nobody on Earth should be hungry.
But people are hungry. You and I see it every single day.
We do. And this is where the source brings in the work of the economist Amartya Sen. He actually won a Nobel Prize for this specific line of research. He studied major famines throughout modern history, and his conclusion was just devastatingly simple. Famines are almost never caused by an actual shortage of food.
Which sounds completely counterintuitive when you first hear it.
Totally counterintuitive.
No?
But he proved that they are caused by a failure of exchange entitlements. That's his economic term for it.
Meaning what exactly, in plain English?
In plain English, it means people starve not because the grain doesn't exist, but because they lack the political or economic power to access it. The food is often literally sitting in local warehouses, or it's actively being exported out of the region while people are starving right outside the gates.
Wow.
It is a distribution problem and a political problem. It is definitively not a production problem.
That is just a heavy realization. It's not that the Earth has hit some hard limit, it's that the logistics are blocked by politics. But let's pivot a bit to energy, because I feel like the phrase energy crisis has been the background noise of my entire life.
Right.
Are we saying that is manufactured too?
The source argues that energy is in the exact same category as food. We are currently in the middle of a major transition from energy being a stock to energy being a flow.
A stock meaning like a pile of coal or a barrel of oil that you burn and then it's gone forever.
Right. Versus a flow which just keeps coming like a river, solar, wind, geothermal. These are technologies that harvest flows that constantly replenish themselves. Between those renewables and modern nuclear, we currently have the technological capacity to scale energy production orders of magnitude beyond what the human race uses right now.
And if you look at Wright's law, which is kind of like Moore's law, but for hardware, the cost of solar has been dropping exponentially for decades.
Exactly. And unlocking cheap, abundant energy unlocks the next massive piece of the puzzle, which is water. You always hear people say the next world war is going to be fought over fresh water.
The ultimate scarcity mindset right there.
Totally. But the source points out that desalination, which is turning ocean water into perfectly safe drinking water, is a fully solved technology. We already know exactly how to do it.
Israel actually uses it for a huge chunk of their national water supply, right?
They do. The main reason we don't just do it everywhere globally is that the process is incredibly energy intensive. But if you solve the energy abundance problem, which we literally just established is technologically possible today, you automatically solve the water problem along with it.
It's a domino effect.
Exactly. The bottleneck isn't the laws of physics anymore. The bottleneck is infrastructure investment, regulatory red tape, and again, politics.
So if you knock down the energy scarcity, the water scarcity falls right behind it. And then if you move over to manufacturing, the source brings up this fascinating concept from Jeremy Rifkin, kind of zero marginal cost. I love this idea, but I think we really need to break it down for folks.
Zero marginal cost is basically the holy grail of modern automation. Think about the old traditional way of making things. If you wanted to build a wooden chair, a craftsman had to spend, say, 10 hours on it. To make a second chair, there's another 10 hours of labor. The model is completely linear.
Right. Your effort directly equals your output.
But with modern automation, CNC machining, advanced robotics, the entire cost model just changes fundamentally. Yes, you have to spend millions of dollars up front building the factory, writing the software code, programming the robotic arms.
The initial capital investment.
Right. But once that capital is deployed, once the machine is actually switched on and running the cost to make the next unit, whether that's a plastic widget or a complex smartphone component, drops to near zero.
It becomes almost like software, just copy and paste in the physical world.
Exactly. Your only real ongoing cost is the raw materials and a tiny bit of electricity. So if we zoom out and connect this back to the bigger picture, the key insight here is that technology makes abundance entirely possible. We can manufacture cheap stuff, generate cheap energy, grow cheap food. But human institutions are what determine if that abundance becomes real for you and me.
So we have the tech. We can feed everyone. We can power the globe. We can make physical goods for pennies. The really obvious question, the one I was practically screaming at my notes while prepping for this, is if we can make enough for everyone, why on earth don't we? Why is my grocery bill still so high? Why is my power bill skyrocketing?
Because according to the source material scarcity is the literal operating system of hierarchy.
Operating system. That phrasing implies it's just running quietly in the background of everything we do, controlling the whole show.
It is. Think about how power functions in a traditional sense. To maintain any kind of hierarchy, to have bosses and workers, to have haves and have-nots, you absolutely require dependency. Yeah. You need regular people to compete against each other for basic resources. You need gatekeepers who get to decide who gets what. If you introduce true systemic abundance, all of those rigid power structures start to dissolve.
Right. Let's play that scenario out. If I have my own high-efficiency solar panels and batteries, and I can 3D print my own replacement parts and grow my own food in some automated vertical garden,
then why do you need to pay the regional utility company? Why do you need to rely on a fragile global supply chain? If energy becomes truly abundant, global fossil fuel oligarchies completely lose their leverage. If manufacturing becomes decentralized and abundant, massive traditional corporate monopolies lose all their pricing power.
Even local political leverage erodes, right? If everyday people aren't constantly stressed about where their next meal or rent check is coming from, They are much, much harder to control or manipulate.
Exactly. It's like the current economic system is fundamentally allergic to abundance. It actively rejects it like a bad organ transplant.
That is a brutally accurate metaphor.
The source actually references Karl Polanyi here, specifically his book, The Great Transformation. He argued decades ago that market economies actually require the creation of artificial scarcity just to function. Just think about the air we breathe. Air is vital. We die without it in a matter of minutes, but it has zero market value because it is completely abundant. You simply can't sell it.
So if everything becomes like air, super available and practically free, the entire profit mechanism of our economy just breaks down. So if solar energy genuinely becomes too cheap to meter, suddenly the trillion-dollar global energy market just completely collapses.
Precisely. And the anthropologist David Graeber went a step further and explicitly called scarcity a political invention. It is not an accident that we don't have nice things globally. It is a core design principle intended to keep the current power structures completely intact.
This is where this deep dive gets incredibly interesting for me because the source material doesn't just stop at physical stuff like apples or barrels of oil. It makes this sharp pivot to knowledge. We always say we live in the information age, right? Information is supposed to be wild and free, but the source argues we are actually seeing a totally new kind of hoarding.
Yes, this is the phenomenon the source calls epistemic asymmetry.
Epistemic asymmetry. Okay, let's definitely unpack that term so we don't sound like we're just swallowing a dictionary here.
It's a bit of a mouthful, but the core concept is so vital to understand. The new game isn't just about hoarding physical wheat or coal anymore. It is about hoarding the actual permission to use knowledge. Because we have the internet, knowledge itself is technically abundant. You can hop online and look up how to treat a basic illness, how to wire a new electrical panel, how to structure a complex legal contract.
I mean, I can watch a YouTube tutorial right now on how to build a log cabin completely from scratch.
You absolutely can. But our modern institutions have shifted their strategy. Instead of hiding the information, they now control who is legally allowed to act on that knowledge. It's all about controlling actionable rights.
The source outlines these specific mechanisms of knowledge stratification, and I really want to run through these because they are things we all deal with every single day, usually without even realizing it. The first big one is credentialism.
Right. This is the ultimate everyday gatekeeper. You might know exactly how to do a specific job. You might have studied it all online, practiced it on your own for years, and literally possess the skills of an absolute master. But without the specific, very expensive stamp of approval from a university or a state licensing board, you simply aren't allowed to do it for a living.
It effectively protects the established guild from any outside competition.
Precisely. It turns the basic concept of knowing how to do something into a highly scarce commodity that you're forced to pay for, usually via massive student loan debt.
Then the second mechanism is IP regime, so intellectual property.
This one is absolutely huge in sectors like pharmaceuticals and big tech. It is a legal tool that converts abundant, easily shared ideas into legally scarce assets. If I discover a new chemical cure and I patent it, I have artificially created legal scarcity around that knowledge just to maintain my high pricing and total control. The idea itself is non-rivalrous, meaning if I use the idea, it doesn't stop you from using the idea, but the legal system makes it rivalrous anyway.
And then the third mechanism is regulatory complexity. This one honestly just feels like it's designed to give you a headache when you read about it, but the source insists it's used as a weapon.
It's basically a defensive moat. Think about it. If the government regulations required to start a new community bank or even launch a simple skincare line are so incredibly complex that you need to hire a team of expensive corporate lawyers just to fill out the initial paperwork, then normal everyday people simply cannot compete.
It keeps the winner's circle very, very small.
Exactly. It creates an artificial barrier to entry that often has absolutely nothing to do with consumer safety and everything to do with protecting the massive incumbent companies from new startups.
So the big takeaway here is that even though knowledge itself is wildly abundant, we literally all walk around with the Library of Alexandria in our pockets. The actual permission to use that knowledge to improve our lives is kept artificially scarce.
That is exactly it. And the source connects this dynamic directly to the work of Ivan Illich. He argued quite famously that modern institutions essentially manufacture dependency. They slowly convince the public that we are completely incapable of doing basic human things for ourselves, like teaching our kids healing our bodies or building our homes without their officially sanctioned costly intervention.
It's deeply psychological.
It really is. It's also very reminiscent of Michel Foucault's ideas about the knowledge and power nexus. If you as an institution get to control what counts as valid or legal knowledge, you effectively control the entire society.
It completely flips the script on how we view the internet. We think we are so free because we can Google literally anything, but functionally we are incredibly restricted in what we can actually do with all that endless information.
We've been reduced to spectators of knowledge rather than active participants.
Okay, I want to play devil's advocate for a second here. Let's imagine we actually manage to smash the current system. We unlock the cheap energy, we distribute all the food fairly, we remove all the institutional gatekeepers. Do we suddenly get a perfect utopia? Does everyone just hold hands and sing songs?
The short, brutal answer is no.
I had a strong feeling you were going to say that. Why not?
Because of a persistent issue, the source calls the animal problem. Ultimately, we are still biological creatures driven by evolution. Even if we completely solve the problem of physical material scarcity, meaning all our base survival needs are met, we still have to deal with the messy reality of human status.
Status. So basically keeping up with the Joneses on a societal level.
Precisely. We really have to draw a hard distinction here between material goods and positional goods. This is a crucial economic distinction. Material goods are tangible things like food, housing, basic health care. We can definitely make those abundant. We can ensure everyone has a full belly and a warm, safe bed. But positional goods are abstract things like social recognition, public influence, being seen as number one, or even just having the corner office with the best view.
Right. If everybody on the track team gets a gold medal, the gold medal is fundamentally worthless. If everyone lives in a penthouse, it's not a luxury penthouse anymore, it's just an apartment.
Exactly. The core value of any positional good depends entirely on someone else not having it. It relies on relative distribution.
Right.
It is by definition a zero-sum game.
So even if literally nobody on Earth is starving people, we'll still be out there fighting over what? Who has the most digital followers? Who gets the VIP table at the restaurant?
Yes. The proverbial rat race does not end just because everyone is well-fed. The source actually cites the sociologist Thorstein Veblen here, who famously coined the term conspicuous consumption. We consume certain luxury things not because we actually need them, but specifically to signal to others that we are better or higher status than they are.
Just flexing, basically.
Exactly. And Pierre Bourdieu talked about this exact same thing with his concept of symbolic capital. Human beings will always inevitably find a new way to create a social hierarchy.
That is honestly a bit depressing. So the warning here is that even if we totally fix the underlying economy, we can't actually fix human nature.
Well, the real insight the source is offering is that hierarchy will inevitably reemerge unless our new institutions are specifically designed from the ground up to prevent it. If you just dump massive physical abundance onto a society without fundamentally changing its underlying culture, people will just invent new, highly abstract ways to oppress each other.
We just trade one rat race for another.
Exactly. We might completely stop fighting over bread and oil and instead start fighting to the death over public attention or exclusive access to gated digital spaces.
That actually leads perfectly into the next major section the source covers, which is all about governance. Because there is this ongoing argument, and I hear this all the time from people who work in big tech or inside the government, that maybe we actually need a little bit of scarcity, or at the very least, maybe we need things to be a little opaque just to keep society stable and functioning.
This is what political scientists call the transparency versus stability dilemma. It is essentially a massive structural engineering problem. On one hand, you have the traditional hierarchical model. Think of Thomas Hobbes and his concept of the Leviathan. You have a strong central authority. It's highly efficient. It dictates and coordinates everything from the top down. It basically says, I will handle all the scary scarcity issues. You just put your head down and follow the rules.
It's the classic, at least the trains run on time argument.
It is. But that model severely concentrates power and creates a massive single point of failure. If that central authority becomes corrupt or just wildly incompetent, everybody in this system suffers simultaneously. On the flip side of that, you have decentralized models. The source heavily highlights the work of Elinor Ostrom here. She won a Nobel Prize for demonstrating how local communities can successfully manage shared resources, like a forest or a local fishery, without any central government control and without privatizing the land.
Managing the commons.
Yes, exactly. But managing a commons is incredibly hard, exhausting work. It requires very high trust, crystal clear rules, and constant, endless communication among everyone involved. It's really messy. is the fundamental difference between a strict dictatorship where decisions are made instantly and a totally open town hall meeting where everyone is shouting at each other.
There's also the very real issue of information overload. The source makes this really compelling point that full, total transparency can actually be completely paralyzing for a society.
Right. Imagine if you, as someone trying to be a responsible, informed learner, had to personally verify the structural safety data of every single bridge you drove over. Or if you had to verify the exact chemical composition of every pill you took, or audit the source code of every app you installed.
I would literally never leave my house. I'd be completely frozen.
Exactly. We all would be. We fundamentally rely on abstraction to survive modern life. We just trust that the bridge is safe so we can drive to work. But that necessary trust absolutely requires a certain level of opacity. We don't get to see the engineering reports. The inherent danger is that opacity is exactly what allows for deep corruption. But total radical transparency just leads straight to cognitive collapse.
So we're kind of trapped. We absolutely need filters just to survive the sheer amount of data, but those filters naturally become powerful gatekeepers, and those gatekeepers inevitably become tyrants.
That is the exact governance loop we are currently trapped in. The source argues the real question we should be asking isn't just hierarchy or no hierarchy, but rather where is hierarchy absolutely necessary for efficiency and where is it actively harmful to human flourishing?
It really feels like we are standing right on the edge of a historical cliff right now. We have these two massive tectonic forces pushing against each other. The new tech that desperately wants to liberate us, and the old institutions that desperately want to control us.
We are absolutely living in a transitional moment. The source describes right now as a critical inflection point. On one side of the tug of war, you have these massive new decentralizing forces.
That would be things like generative AI, right?
Yes, AI is a massive one. It is rapidly, totally reducing the knowledge gap between an elite expert and a total novice. It is functionally democratizing intelligence itself. But then you also have the rise of open source software distributed energy like putting solar panels directly on your roof, and additive manufacturing like desktop 3D printing. All of these specific technologies are actively pushing power out away from the center and into the edges of society.
They are chipping away at the epistemic asymmetry we talked about.
Exactly. You don't need the massive corporate factory anymore if you have the printer on your desk. You don't need the centralized power grid if you have the solar panel on your roof.
But the empire always strikes back.
Always. You have the entrenched forces of centralization fighting back incredibly hard right now. You see it in surveillance capitalism, which is a great concept from Shoshana Zuboff, where these big tech monopoly platforms constantly harvest our private data just to predict and control our daily behavior. You see it in regulatory capture, where giant corporations literally write the laws to keep scrappy new competitors out of their markets. You see it in massive platform consolidation.
It is a brutal tug of war.
And historically speaking, this follows a very predictable pattern. The source points out that historically, every single wave of technological liberation is immediately followed by a fierce movement toward authoritarian control. When the printing press was first invented, it radically liberated information across Europe. The church and the state completely panicked, so they immediately moved in to aggressively license the printers, tightly control the paper supplies, and establish strict censorship laws.
And we are basically watching that exact same historical battle play out right now in real time with the internet and AI.
100%.
So what does all this ultimately mean for us as we navigate this stuff? We've covered a huge amount of ground today, from fake food shortages to the permission economy to the endless status rat race. If you had to really boil this down for someone, why does scarcity stubbornly persist? Why are we still acting like we're deeply poor when, as a species, we are technically incredibly rich?
The source offers a really clean, highly defensible synthesis of exactly why. It basically comes down to 4 major points.
Okay, let's walk through them.
Number 1 is that absolute physical limits do still exist.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot entirely ignore real-world logistics. You still have to physically move heavy atoms around the globe. We aren't living in a fully digital simulation just yet. Number 2 is that institutional inertia is just massively heavy. Systems that were built over centuries on a foundation of scarcity do not turn on a dime. You simply cannot reboot the entire global economic system overnight without catastrophic fallout.
It's like trying to parallel park an aircraft carrier.
Exactly. Number 3 is that existing power structures are aggressively self-preserving. The specific people who benefit the most from the current manufactured scarcity, the global gatekeepers, the corporate monopolists, have absolutely zero personal incentive to fix the system. In fact, They have every financial incentive in the world to actively block abundance from happening.
That's the part that really stings. They are actively betting against a better future just to keep their slice of the pie.
It is grim but true.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, number 4 is that the transition costs are just incredibly high. Historical abundance tends to severely destabilize the old system, long before the new, better system is fully functional and ready to take over. That messy gap creates a lot of real-world chaos. And historically, everyday people fear short-term chaos much more than they hate long-term scarcity.
That really does put the whole thing into perspective. It's clearly not just one evil villain in a volcano lair. It's this deeply tangled, messy web of physical logistics, human psychology, and entrenched politics.
Exactly. But I do think there's a way to cut through that mess. I want to leave you with a final, really provocative thought that builds right on top of this source material.
Let's hear it.
We spend so much of our time and energy in society constantly asking, what is technologically possible? We ask, can we build the flying car? Can we use CRISPR to cure the terrible disease? Can we finally build the colony on Mars?
Right, we treat the future like it's just one big engineering test we have to pass.
But by doing that, we completely ignore the darker, much more important question, which is what is institutionally blocked.
Institutionally blocked.
Yes. So the challenge for you listening to this right now is to really look around your own daily life. The next time you encounter something that is incredibly expensive or frustratingly rare, whether that is buying a house or trying to afford a specific medicine or paying off a university degree, pause and ask yourself a slightly different question.
Is this expensive because it's genuinely rare to produce?
Exactly. Is this expensive because of physics? Or is it expensive because someone somewhere absolutely needs it to be expensive just to maintain their own social and economic position?
That is absolutely going to stick with me every single time I pay a ridiculous bill or get forced to fill out some overly complex form. I'm going to be wondering, am I hitting a real physical wall right now, or am I just hitting an invisible political one?
And honestly, simply realizing that distinction exists is the very first step toward actually dismantling it.
Hmm.
Because once you finally see the mechanics of manufactured scarcity, you really can't unsee them.
Well, I think that is the perfect place to wrap up this deep dive. Thank you so much for tuning in and going down this rabbit hole with us. We really hope this gives you a totally new lens to look at the world around you and maybe inspires you to start questioning some of those everyday limits you keep running into.
Definitely keep asking the hard questions.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.